Hi, my name is Vincenzo Berghella. Once again, welcome to another edition of AJOG MFM Live. Today we'll cover from idea to publication. It's my great pleasure to have a great friend with us today. Dania, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Danya McKean. I'm an MFM at Geisinger, and I had the honor of being trained by the legend, Dr. Berghella, so I'm really excited that he invited me to moderate this session for him.
Oh, no. That's the first unexpected thing. Thank you, Dania. Thank you for that. So very excited to go over these issues. I want to welcome the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine because they invited me recently to give a lecture on how to publish, and a lot of that I gave to the MFM fellows here in the United States. I've had the pleasure to edit a few journals, and in particular the Gray Journal and the Pink Journal. But this today, it's just me. We're just gonna go through what Danya and I think about how to go from idea to publication. So learning objectives, Danya?
So today we'll go over how to publish practice-changing research in MFM, really taking it through the entire process from having the idea inception to dissemination, and how to be happy with research and publishing. So Vincenzo, why do you do research and why publish?
So a lot of people, I think, do it because it's important for their CV, for career advancement, from assistant, associate professor, the usual thing. But I must admit, I never really did it for those reasons. Thinking back 30 some years and hundreds of papers, etc. I really did it because I wanted to change the world and improve maternal and perinatal health. There's still too many complications in our field, in pregnancy, in every pregnancy in particular. And I really wanted the stillbirth rate to go down, the maternal morbidity, mortality to go down, the health, of babies and mothers in general to be better, and also wanted to be happy. And I'll go over a quick publication that I did a few years ago on happiness that you can find everywhere on the internet. And I think research and publishing really puts it all together. First of all, lets me interact with great people like you. Great team, social ties. We become friends. About my family, I know about your family, in our hobbies, etc. It lets you do what you like to do because it is something that, to me, makes my life better. The goal and meaning that I just talked about, improving people's lives. And again, publishing and research lets you change what you do to the clinical patient that day, seeing patients this afternoon and providing better care because you did the research. And then it is hard work and engagement, which is actually level 1 evidence-based, proven to bring happiness. And then at the end, you get the pat in the back. I pat Dani in the back for what she publishes me in the back for what we publish together. What about you? Any comment from you, Dania?
So really for me, I think it's about, it gives you the broadest reach. So as a physician, we have the honor of really being there for patients on a direct patient care level. As educators, as fellowship directors, we are able to educate our junior colleagues who will take over for us. But I feel like research really gives you the broadest reach to everyone else. And really it lets you impact how we're taking care of patients and making things better for our patients, as that's why most of us go into medicine to begin with. So Vincenzo, how do you come up with a research idea?
Well, it's from clinical work, and what you say, the beauty is, the clinical work, the patient by patient, and then bringing that back to 145 million births. 145 million births in the world every year. It's a huge impact, but you can't really start at that level. For me to start, it's from doing rounds in the hospital, seeing patients in the outpatient clinic, comparing ideas with medical students, residents, and that's where I think I get over 90% of the ideas. We see another. An issue with, bile acids and cholestasis, what's the real cutoff we use, and then we research it, look at the whole literature, come up with our own data. And that's how I come up with most of my ideas. Some of them come because I do get, for example, the table of contents automatically from all these journals, from the high-end journal, JAMA, New England, Lancet, but also from, as I say, gray and pink and green and blue, et cetera, all our journals. And these are the ones I get. It doesn't have to be. They don't have to be the ones everybody looks at. There are other wonderful other journals. But when I read an article on something I didn't think about before, something that maybe I saw that morning, and I wasn't aware there was a randomized study or there was a good research about it, then I gives me the incentive to.
And now I was going to ask you, actually, AJOG MFM is a newer journal, so how do you get access to that?
So here it is. I was getting ahead of myself. So you can actually, if you're an SMFM member, get an annual thing for only $20. You go to AJOG MFM, all one word, .org, and you find it online, easy. And also, if you want to get alerts, there's this little red arrow here. Again, on ajogmfm.org, you just press alerts and you decide, if you want to get the full journal, articles as they come up, et cetera, et cetera. So it's pretty straightforward and easy. I guess I'll continue talking about the idea. I think to me, it's really important to have an important idea, to find an area of controversy. I often make the comparison with, von Willebrand disease, a disease I really like, and I think it's complex and interesting, but not too many people have that. If you do research on preeclampsia or on cesarean section, like you have done, or obesity, or preterm birth, or on something hot, that it's hot at that moment, COVID, disparities, etc. I think that has the opportunity to have even a greater impact, kind of do the impossible, like Walt Disney said. And obviously, to me, the ultimate is to do a randomized controlled trial. I think competition it's a good thing. A lot of people get bogged down. They have an idea, then something comes out in the literature, maybe from their own town. Here's Philadelphia. Like again, on cervical length, for me, when I started my career, everybody was publishing cervical length. But it was, I was lucky that way. I didn't realize it then, but I realize it now. You want to publish on something that a lot of people are publishing on, so that they quote you, so you quote them, so you meet them at conferences, you share ideas, you form teams, you do the larger studies yourself to be able to be the change you want to see in the world, not complain that, we still don't know this, but actually be the one, we still don't know this. Let me research it. Let me get a good team and change the world. I will never forget, Dania, when you came and interviewed. I think soon after you actually started, and you feel free to add to this. But I remember there were 50 patients, I think, randomized in the literature. One little study about sutures or staples. We kind of discussed the staples we thought were the best. You did the survey as well. Most people were using staples. You did a 746 patients randomized study, huge, all done during fellowship, and really changed the world. Because again, you published the meta-analysis, the Cochrane, subgroup analysis, and now around the world, I lecture everywhere. People are using suture. It's really, over 30 million C-sections in the world, and you made people use sutures. I don't know if you want to comment yourself about your experience, but to me, it's a perfect example of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it was really amazing. And what I loved actually is that you and I both thought that staples was better. So it made me trust the results even more, since it wasn't what we thought was going to happen. And I never realized, honestly, when I was doing that, how much it would affect my future course. I mean, because of that, as you said, we ended up doing the meta-analysis. I mean, I even wrote the chapter for you in the Bergella series. I mean, it's really just affected my career in such a great way that I never expected from just doing one study that I really wanted to know, because we had 1.4 million C-sections in the US when I started the project, and we didn't know how we should close a C-section skin incision. And I just thought that was terrible, which is why I really wanted to answer the question.
I remember, actually, we haven't talked about this in a long time. You went to the WHO. We went to Geneva. You were invited because of these papers and some of the papers. they invited you. Do you remember that?
Yeah. That was an amazing experience because it was the technical consultation on cesarean. So we met with other people from America, of course, and around the world, really just to come together to make some decisions on a population health level, what the C-section rates should be across the world, and not necessarily on a hospital level or anything like that, but just from a population ecological perspective. So it was really an amazing opportunity.
So, you're proof that it can be done. And then, after you find that you have your niche, people invite you everywhere, invite you to write, like you say, chapters and books, etc. And many others, similar to you. This is Corina Schoen, which really has contributed randomized studies and many other studies on using two agents for induction, like, meso and Foley or Foley and oxytocin. And now we do that routinely in the US, at least, instead of using just one agent. So she changed the world. Alexis changed the world as well, because there's only one randomized study, and it's hers, on how long the second stage should be. So when you get to 3 hours, she randomized patients to pushing, another hour or two versus being delivered right away. That also changed, ACOG guidance. Johanna changed ACOG guidance. She's now at UNC. We used to induce everybody at 34 weeks if they had pre-labor, preterm rupture membrane. And now instead, because of our IPD meta-analysis, thanks to our collaborators from Holland and Australia, again, international wonderful team, ACOG tells us, no, you don't have to induce everybody at 34 weeks. You can offer them, if they're not infected, the chance of continuing the pregnancy. And lastly, and this is kind of today's news, Rup Shabolik, one of our former fellows as well and current faculty, she did a randomized studies on vaginal progesterone versus 17P for prevention of recurrent preterm birth, so in women with a prior spontaneous preterm birth. And she's also going to change the world, because the trend of the data, including the systematic review and meta-analysis that you see here, just published a few days ago, last month, in the Pink Journal, tends to show that for many reasons, vaginal progesterone may be more effective and cheaper and easier and to use and find. So again, amazing success, through the young trainees listening to us, again, in Australia or South Africa or South America or anywhere. This can be done. All these are true stories of how you can cling to an idea and change the world. And I think the easiest way to change the world is randomized trials and systematic reviews, but it doesn't have to be that way for sure. And it doesn't have to be the way you, Dania, and others have done it. I think you first have to know yourself. This is the Temple of Apollo in Delphis. I love these three mottos, so to speak. We'll go over them later. But first, you have to kind of find out, what you like, controversial aspect, something you're interested in. Because to tell us, for example, how difficult it was to randomize 746 patients during 3 years of fellowship.
So I did not know quite how big a bite I was taking out of when I was doing this project. So, I remember going to vacation to Sri Lanka at some point, and I was still calling back to make sure that patients were getting randomized and enrolled. And Sri Lanka is like 11 hours ahead, so I had to take that into consideration. But it's constant, and you're always following up and ensuring. But it's a huge deal. But I think it really gave me a much better understanding when I read RCTs of just appreciating the effort and work that goes into other people's research. And it allows me to make a better decision, I think, as to whether or not I want to apply new findings to take care of my patients. So it's just been amazing on so many levels. Though certainly a lot of work, and you do want to make sure that you have a wonderful team that you're working with. Otherwise, and same with the study that you're referencing, Vincenzo, we would never have been able to do it without our wonderful colleagues at the other institutions.
And it's great you captured them, you recognized them. I think Yale, right? You collaborated with.
Yeah. And Yale and Lankenau.
And it's precious to especially when you do something that big and important, to have so much help. Mm-hmm. So again, kind of what we're saying, find expertise you don't have. If they're not great at statistics, learn them. In fellowship, you should do everything, be able to do everything from idea to publication. But at the same time, get some experts, get some mentors. I think it's really important that if you're looking to publish, you get a mentor that has published. If a mentor has published one paper, is all clear, that's not really good. It's the same way you're trying to learn a CVS. You don't want to learn from somebody who just has done 3 of them. Beat deadlines, find something that is feasible. And again, if you're stuck for 5 minutes on something, you can figure out SPSS or Stata or RevMan or the instruction to authors or whatever. Find a friend, so to speak, and get help. And this is the division current picture of some of the division members in MFM at Jefferson. They help me every day, and I couldn't do this without them. It's again, Rupsh is also on the right, but there are many others pictured here, and it's through their everyday help that I can get things done. So we have identified the idea. You found your team. What do you do after, Danya? How do you proceed after this?
So really, after I identify the topic, I do a literature search for the first time, and really, it's a cursory literature search. So this is really to decide whether it's worth studying. So as you mentioned, if there are a lot of different publications already on this topic, it's still okay to do the project, but I think it's important to make sure you're adding to the data. So is there a limitation that another project had that you can overcome? Wonderful. Do you have a lot more patients that you could add to this? Wonderful. Because I do think it's important that we don't just recreate what other people have done, but make it better every time. So this would be just a cursory literature search. And then as you're doing that, you want to make decisions about your study design, the population that you're going to include, and how you're going to approach the study. And I do that concurrently with writing the protocol. And then once I've decided whether or not it's a study that's worthwhile pursuing, and it's okay at this point to not pursue it, right? Because you can cut your losses early if that cursory literature search has told you that, this is a really well answered question. But if you decide that you're going to progress the study, then you do a formal literature search where you want to be really thorough, and you use that to write the background for the protocol. One thing I always tell my fellows and residents is to try and decrease the amount of work that they're in the end going to do. I tell them to write the background for their protocol really well so that they can just use that same background for the manuscript. And of course, when the actual data is going to be published, you need to update the literature search again, just to make sure that you have all the final data available in case things have changed. I also asked them to create the demographics table because this helps tell them what variables they need to collect at baseline. And then we also create the outcomes table. If you could advance the slide, Vincenzo. And this allows you to decide specifically what variables you are interested in collecting. And I think this is really important because you don't want to get to the end of your study and realize that there was a variable that you had wanted to collect and you forgot to, because some things can only be collected prospectively. And I always tell my fellows and residents, collect what you need, collect only what you need, and use everything that you collect. So there are times that I might not report everything that I collect, but I use it for a calculation. As for example, I'll collect height and weight, but I'll report BMI. So just make sure that you do that. Really, again, not to waste your time. And then writing your manuscript. So Vincenzo definitely taught me this. So you want to write your manuscript as soon as you submit your protocol, because that's really when you have the most momentum for your study. And then you can also ensure that everything you want to show is included. And this is where I really use my protocol to write that first manuscript. So as I said, the background of the IRB submission becomes my background of the introduction of the manuscript. The methods for the IRB becomes the material methods of the paper. The tables turn into results. And I even add sentences, assuming proof of the null hypothesis. So for example, when I did my fellowship thesis for suture versus staples, I wrote it as suture. There's no difference in wound complications between the two. So then it was really exciting for me when I had to go back and update that to show that there was a difference. And the majority of the discussion can also be written while you're waiting for the results. so that then when you get the results, it's much easier to just adjust the paper to submit. And then also make sure, I think this is something a lot of us forget as we're doing RCTs, you want to keep track of everyone you screen for the study and why they were or were not included in the study, because you'll need this for the consort. So also just make sure you're following the guidelines for whichever. So if you're doing RCTs, consort, or if you need to follow Prisma or Strobe, just make sure you're following the checklist guidelines so that at the end you haven't missed anything. So Vincenzo, once you have your results, do you think it's important for people to always submit to abstracts for presentations, or can they just go right to publishing?
I think most of the time it's good to present, but let me emphasize a couple of things you went over, which I feel very strongly about. Writing the manuscript first, having the tables ready, like you say, all of that, and the literature search. It's so important. In fact, many times, as people know, since fortunately I publish so much, I tend to do kind of systematic review, even if it's not randomized trials. Recently we looked at PID in pregnancy. Again, it's a perfect example. Katrina, one of our fellows, with a case of PID in pregnancy. We didn't know much about it. There are not that many cases reported in the literature. And so, we put them all together, and it's been published in a high impact journal. I think actually in the Great Journal, to our surprise. And there was a perfect example of, again, doing a literature search. Now we could do a randomized studies, let's say, studying what antibiotics to use, outpatient versus inpatient, different things. But I think you can't do prospective work unless you do the literature on your topic, back and forth, like you did, for example, for C-section. And presenting, I think it's great. SMFM, kind of it's our love. I've been going to SMFM, actually, I think next year will be 27 years in a row. Unbelievable. Since 95, I started in 94, my fellowship. Since 95, I've been going every year. And, if you get an oral there, it changes your life. Not only people kind of get to know what you're interested in, but then, they come and they want to collaborate, they want to know when the paper comes out, they want to write letters, they want to give you ideas, they want to give you their data. It's just amazing. And again, if you present there at the American College or AJOG or the European Association or the Australians or the Latin America, whatever, I think it gives you a great chance to present something that it's important. And again, it's a lot of work to present. Some people are really scared of getting up on a podium and having 1,000 people, listen to them, like you and I are doing today. But it's, as you can see here, it's far and away the best prize that life has to offer, is the chance to work hard or work worth doing. And, sharing your work with others, your papers gets better because, what the reviewers would have said, there's a shortcoming. You hear it right away, in front of your poster. Somebody comes around and says, oh, you could do this analysis. Why don't you do this? You may have made a mistake somewhere, and it's much better to do it at this stage. And you need to sell it like it's revolutionary and inspire. People who start their thing and say, oh, this is a small thing, it's not that great. You're killing yourself. You have to believe in it. I read a lot of Steve Jobs books on how to present, see TED Talks. And again, especially in the first 3 minutes, and I hope we did it today, you need to kind of inspire and tell people, this is really important. It will change your life. In our case, we told people this will make you happy, hopefully, which is the ultimate, I think, in life. And I agree about what writing the manuscript before. I say, you kind of, once you get to publications, you need to do it yourself, finding good mentors, following instructions very closely. There are more and more strict instructions, for example, at the Pink and Gray for randomized controlled trials. If your manuscript, it may have the best data, the best, revolutionary findings in the world, but if it's not formatted well, it's different fonts, it doesn't follow the instructions to the authors. The last line there, the cover letter says JAMA instead of, American Journal of OBGYN or vice versa. people know that you're sending it everywhere. People get pretty defensive, like the Green Journal may say, oh, they sent it to the Gray first. I don't want this, if the Gray declined it. And the classification matches when you put in, cesarean or preeclampsia or preterm birth are really important, because we as editors use those to send it to reviewers. And let's say, Dania's publishing something on obesity, and she checks obstetrics, labor management. Somebody who's interested in labor management, because I check those reviewers, may hate obesity. And instead, if I send it for an editor, it's a lot of work. But if I send, if I see something on C-section, especially on skin closure, I'm going to send it to Dania, because she's done the work. She probably wants herself quoted, which I agree with. She wants to make sure that the randomized studies is big enough and good enough, like hers was. And all of a sudden, she's going to click yes, help me, and help the world, so to speak. So I think some of these issues are really key and so important. And again, if you can, go ahead.
I was going to say, just to hit home the point you said about making sure you're formatting correctly. And I tell everyone, because, and I know you are always very, you always want us to continue to submit even if we get rejected. So it's really important, because as example, what you said before, the Green and the Gray have very different formatting instructions. So if you don't change it between the two, then the Gray, or the Green, let's say, is going to know that the Gray rejected you. And you don't really want, you're trying to get this published, you don't really want other people to know that you weren't wanted. So you really do have to make sure that you follow the correct formatting requirements for the journal that you're trying to submit to in between.
We'll talk about bias in a few slides, and clearly I can fail, and I'm sure my colleagues, editors, and you're part of the editorial board, you feel it. If it's not formatted right, all of a sudden you don't believe it anymore. If they didn't go through the thing of putting the right journal name or whatever, right, then you're not going to believe Table 6 and their data, right, because that also may not be accurate. Right. So truly, the formatting, it's like you present. Like, you and I, presenting today, probably people are going to look at my white shirt or your beautiful flowery dress, or your beautiful jacket. They may listen to what we're saying, but they're also looking at the format, the appearance.
Right. Attention to detail is important.
Yeah. And if you can, another important point as an editor, research letters, shorter, less than 5 minute, less than 5 references, kind of quick reports, have a much higher chance of acceptance. So I highly recommend, if you have something that is really not that much data, that's fine. Editors actually love that. The Lancet, JAMA, and New England live by that. They have a lot of letters, a lot of editorials, a lot of short research letter. And in general, I don't, you can contact me, but I think in general you don't have to, and you may be counterproductive. When I get even Dania, when I get her your manuscript, first of all, I don't know it's from yours. We'll go over, it's blinded, and second of all, it's up to the reviewers. Once I send it to the reviewers, it's up to reviewers to tell me yes or no. And if you tell me something special about your manuscript, you can put that in the cover letter. You usually don't have to contact the editor.
So Vincenzo, I know we talk about impact factors a lot, but how do you really choose the journal once you have your data and your paper is done?
So some of it, I think it's impact factor, because again, impact factor means, the article, the higher the impact factor, the more the articles in that journal get cited, get referenced by another thing, another journal. And that's what you want. You want people to know about what you do. But it's also important to kind of fit it somewhere that people, where people are going to like it. For example, the New England Journal really doesn't publish as many meta-analysis. JAMA does. Lancet is obviously more international. AJOG, I think, it's a lot more translational than the Grid Journal, that OBGYN, meaning obstetrics and gynecology likes more clinical paper. AJOG often more basic science or translational. Doesn't have to be that way, but if the editors particularly found a preterm birth or preeclampsia, that I will follow that. For example, at the Pink Journal, people know that I like randomized studies. you kind of have to pick the better journal impact factor wise, and also the one that fits, I think, the flavor of your research.
So I actually also, I have a list of journals that I tend to go towards depending on what I'm trying to submit, but I also use Jane. So if you Google that, it's the journal author name estimator. So if you put in your abstract, it will actually spit out a list of journals that have published similar things. So I found that really a helpful website. So Vincenzo, one thing that I've been struggling with lately with journals when I'm mentoring my juniors is, how do you identify predatory journals?
So it's not easy. I think, one thing that your question reminds me of is that there are a lot of actually not only predatory journals, but not perfect research, and that's why there are so many rules and making sure that your research is truly well done, that you didn't make it up. Unfortunately, even in pregnancy, there are hundreds of papers that are made up that are being retracted all the time. But there's that aside, predatory journals. I think an easy tip is, if they ask you for money at any time, you shouldn't be paying. That's my personal opinion again. You worked on something 10 years or 2 years or 6 months, lots of sweat and tears. And I don't think you should be paying. So if they're asking you to pay, it's probably a predatory journal. Another way is to look, if they have an impact factor, who publishes them. At the end, it's always the same, Elsevier, Wiley, Cambridge, the same publishers. You want to look at their websites. You also want to look if your friends, are publishing there or not. There are really 80 some OBGYN journals, so there are plenty to go around. I wouldn't go for somebody that sends you an email from nowhere and you never heard of them. You can do better. There are 80 journals of OBGYN SSA. You will find one of those will like your research. You don't have to pay anybody.
It's funny because I used to think, I used to associate having to pay for publishing my article with predatory journal, but now that so many journals are doing open access, where the authors are actually paying for the open access so that the reader doesn't have to. What are your thoughts about that? And how that might be changing the landscape of what's getting published?
So open access works, in many different ways. The original thing for open access is, so even, for example, at some of the journals we talked about, including the Pink, some of the articles are, you have to be a subscriber. Like I say, $20 in your subscriber at AJOG MFM. But some of them are editor's choice. We as editors decide our editor's choice, and those are free open access. So even if you're not a subscriber to AJOG MFM, and AJOG works the same way, the Great Journal works the same way, you can access them. That's open access. But some people make you pay for that open access. And sometimes it's also a good thing. I'll give you another example. NIH, you get a grant. Often in the grant, you put in the fact that you will publish the article, and it will cost you $3,000 because the New England Journal makes you pay $3,000 for open access. And that's great because it's taxpayer dollars. You want the data not only to be in the New England Journal website and subscribers on the New England Journal, but accessible everywhere. The problem I have with is that journals that under the open access force you to pay, and they're not the New England or the Great Journal.
Right. No, that makes sense. So once you submit to a journal, what's the process that your manuscript goes through with the editorial review?
So these are what I've learned, at the journals I've been at, and especially now the Gray and the Pink. So me or you submits a journal. It goes to a managing editor, a non-MD, a non-physician or practitioners. And again, if you send it to the Pink Journal, it has to do with ectopic pregnancy, GYN topic, and we only really do ongoing pregnancies. Then even the managing editor may decline, but usually that happens maybe 1-2% of the time. So most of the time, the managing editor says, okay, this is about 23 transfusion syndrome. It's a pregnancy journal. Perfect. I'm going to send it to the editor. And usually there are many editors. She kind of decides who is less busy at that time, who has less of a pile in their software of journals. Then let's say I get it as an editor and I may decline it because it's one case of 22 transfusion. It's describing an amni reduction, which we've known about 20 some years, and we don't accept case reports, and I may decline it. About many journals, kind of good established journals like the ones I've been talking about, may have up to 50% rejectance rate at this point. So that's why you kind of need to make the pitch and the cover letter to the editor that this is important. I would say that a gray and probably green, I would suppose, and pink, the decline rate with the editor is less than 50%, maybe 20, 30, 40%, depending on the editor. And most of the time that is sent to reviewers, usually a few of them, so that at the end you have 2 or 3 that reply and give you some feedback. Some journals tell you to suggest reviewers, and you can suggest your friends and cousins and sisters and brothers. But there is literature on that, and I've read it, and it makes it a little bit more biased of a process. So in general, I must admit, you can suggest reviewers, but I usually don't pick them unless I know that they're really going to be objective. And then those reviews eventually, again, 2 or more, get back to the editor. And if it's 2 rejects and it's 10 cases of something that is well known, you just didn't want to reject it right away, then it goes one way. If it's a large randomized studies and you have 2 stellar or more than 2 stellar reviewers being very positive, then you tend to accept it, after revisions. And sometimes you actually are on the verge, and maybe that's when you get more editors to kind of chime in and help you decide, because some of these decisions are not easy at all. I'll talk about the review process, Dania, also in terms of double blind or not. I feel very strongly about this. So double-blind review means that reviewers do not know the author's names or affiliations. So if you send a paper, I do not know it's my good friend Danny McKean, who I admire. I don't know it's from Geisinger. I'm blind to that. And we wanted to do that from the beginning. Other journals are beginning to do it now. But there's evidence that without double-blind peer review, there's bias. This is the first AJOG MFM fellow, Adina Kern-Goldberger, and she published in the Great Journal the impact of double-blind peer review on gender bias, for example. And at the end, to make the long story short, the studies she found had reasonable evidence that gender bias may exist in scientific publishing, and that double blinding, again, not knowing the institutions and the authors, but the reviewers, can mitigate the impact. And with Dr. Ucci and D'Antonio, we also published this year in the Pink Journal. You see, if you look, going back to what you said at the beginning, you really need to know the literature. We found 11 randomized trials and over 7,000 of reviewers and manuscripts being randomized to, again, be blind to the author's name or not during the review process. And if you're blind, you tend to be more objective and more strict. So you accept less. Mm-hmm. Which means that, again, if I do know it's Daniel McKean, I tend to accept it. If I don't know it's Daniel McKean, I just am more objective about the data, with all due respect. There's very little data on the effect of authors and institution prestige. There's really no data on race and ethnic group, which is terrible. Only 2 randomized studies assess U.S. versus non-U.S. because non-randomized studies have said that authors' prestige makes a difference, race makes a difference. If you're from the U.S., usually have a higher acceptance rate, but randomized studies haven't really looked at that much. But they've looked at gender, and look at what I underlined here. If you blind a male author's name, so John Smith, if I know it's John Smith, I'm going to accept it more. If I don't know about John Smith, I'm going to accept it less, which is just terrible. Didn't seem to make a difference if it's, again, Jane Doe. And lastly, while we try really hard to do this, it's not easy to blind this, because, again, if the large randomized studies on IVIG, on CMV comes out, and they've screened 300,000 people, Review, everybody knows that it's from the network here in the US and where the article is from. But I really do think that this is an important step in the right direction, and that all papers should do this. And another point on publication is that, and maybe you can chime in on this, I feel like I'm the most rejected author at Tetrix. I gave myself this cup. You cannot get rejected, and most of the time you're going to get rejected. AJOG is a 7%, I think, acceptance rate. Even us at the Pink now, 1 in 4 gets accepted. So most of the time you're going to get declined, from most journals, unless maybe, like you said, it's predatory or whatever. So just relax, sit back, and send it somewhere else. Don't you agree?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I think you instilled that in me in fellowship, because I still remember my first paper that I had submitted got rejected, of course. And, when you're doing research, you and your team have put so much of yourself into this project, and then you get rejected. It's heartbreaking. And then a day or two later, you were just like, where are you going to resubmit this? And I was still heartbroken. I needed some time to get over that before I could move on to the next journal. But I think you're absolutely right. Like, the more you get rejected, the more resilient you become, and you're able to turn things around faster and move on, because then you understand it's just the process. But I think that takes a little bit earlier on, because it's a skill to acquire, being good with being rejected.
Yeah. People, I think, take it too personally. I've could name so many names. Some people even stop publishing it. I think it's a pity, because you work something on so much, and then you don't get it out, and it kind of stops you from doing it again, which is a pity for women and patients and babies, and improving their health. So I have a 7 days resubmission deadline after rejection, as you're laughing and know well. You get the email, you're somber and sad, for a few hours, less than 24 hours. It's like, you lose a soccer match or a basketball match or a baseball match, and then you just train again and go to the next game. And eventually you get it in. 80 plus OBGYN articles. It's impossible not to get it in. Really important. So if you're lucky enough that editors like it, reviewers like it, you get an email back. Read that email well. And in fact, a lot of people read the email. Your paper cannot be accepted at this point. You cancel the email. And you go cry and get drunk. With your friends. Read that well. It has happened so many times. I'm sure it has happened to you and I. I know that. So read it well, and then it tells you, but you could send it back, with changes and stuff. The famous reply letter. And again, do it well. Follow the instruction to authors closely. For example, the gray and the pink use the so-called ABCD format. A, question; B, reply; C, where you make the changes; D, kind of the changes you make. I would say maybe 10 to 20% of the time I see replies without that format. Right away, my blood pressure, Danya, gets raised a little bit. Do I send it back to the format? Then I try to look at it and try to make sure that they answered it. But it puts me in a bad mood, to begin with. It's so clear, it's been like that forever. And I think you need to kind of follow what people tell you as much as you can. Answer the questions. You can't just say, "Oh, I don't think it's right. I'm not going to do it." You need to say something more. And if at the end, instead of reviewer 1, reviewer 2, reviewer 3, you find editor, and the editor says, you need to take out the multiparous. This should be only on nulliparous. You probably should do it, because you have a chance of getting declined. And if you don't do it, that answer should be pretty long and detailed.
I think it's important there to be respectful as you respond, right? Because these reviewers are people who are volunteering, giving their time because they want to help you make the paper better for publication and have a greater impact. So I think that's something we have to be cautious about too when we respond to reviewers, is just be kind and be courteous and respectful, because they're trying to help you make your paper a stronger one.
That's a great comment. So I do review even for, JAMA, New England, whatever. I have never been paid as a reviewer. you've probably never been paid, which is unfortunate. I think reviewers should be compensated in some way. So again, somebody on a Saturday morning has spent an hour or two or even more. Some of the reviewers' comments are very long sometimes. And then, when you reply, you say, "Oh, I just don't agree," and that's it. It's just, again, I think, poor form and not what people should do. So kind of some of the other comments on how to publish. Again, through all this, you need to find a good mentor, somebody who's done it, tens, if dozens, or even hundreds of times. You should be a reviewer. You should do it often. If it's something you want to get to and kind of become a master of, you should do it often. And again, never give up. If it's some stats you need help with, or you don't like to write, find something, to write for you, with you, get rejected, never give up. Any comments on these issues?
Well, I was going to ask you now, how do you become a reviewer? What is your suggestion?
So the suggestion, you can actually write to us editors. You can write to the journals. I'm sure you can go to all of the journal, Gray, Green, Pink, etc., and write to us. By many journals, including ours, if you publish something, then you automatically become a reviewer. And it's also in the reply that I see. You do your first review, and you write, "Thank you very much for inviting me. Love to do it again. These are my topics." But I guess one of the easiest ways, I think, is to go to the websites and just sign up. And if you have any trouble, let me know. You learn a lot. We had this year, now we have every year 3 AJOG MFM fellows. They kind of spend time with us editors, learning the process from idea to publication. And they were most interested in the review process, and they wanted to review, and they wanted to get feedback. So we give Kate and Jen and Matt personal feedback on the reviews so that they can be better. We actually vote. I don't know if you know, we rank the reviews, in particular, AJOG and AJOG MFM 1 to 6. If you get a 6, it's exceptional. If you get a 1, that means terrible job. And I only invite people who have 4.5, 5, or more now. And AJOG in particular has such a wonderful history of people having done, like you and I, dozens, if not more, reviews. So not only become a reviewer, try to get then a good score, and then you get invited again. And again, some of the secrets, I guess, would be out. Editors, unfortunately, are not blinded to authors. And every year, for example, at AJOG MFM, we give rewards to the best reviewers. I mean, if you're a great reviewer, you've done more than 10 reviews in a year, you won a prize, you get, your average score is 5.5 out of 6, and then you send a paper in. I shouldn't, but it certainly tells me that you're in the game. You understand this game better. So I think that's a little secret. I probably shouldn't give out, but I think it's important to discuss.
Don't worry, only 1,000 people will know that little secret. So
exactly.
One thing we do actually with my fellows, we'll have them do reviews with us. So a couple of us are reviewers for various journals, and when we get a review, the fellow will do it with me. I'll do it, they'll do it.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me because I think that we train everything, right? We train you how to do a C-section. And I think we should train people how to do reviews. I feel like seeing them through the process of fellowship, they do really change from the first review they do to me till when they graduate. And then later, and I pay that forward, right? So when I am asked to do a review and I can't do a review, I will then recommend that they do it. So that's how I get them into the process. But in a way that I know I can stand behind their review. And I think it's actually wonderful for their education too, as you say, because it really just teaches you what you should focus on when you're doing a study, like mistakes to avoid, things to focus on doing right. I think it's almost as important as journal club reviews and understanding research process. So I think being a reviewer is an amazing opportunity. And if you have the chance to do a review with someone else to just sort of learn the process before you have to sink or swim on your own, I think you should definitely take advantage of that if you have mentors at your institution who are already reviewers.
That's a great example. First, do with somebody, but then, for example, if I invite you to do something about C-section and you're busy, you are, 2 weeks vacation coming up, you have 3 grants, you're working on, it's fine to decline. We understand that not every reviewer invited is going to say yes. It's, again, volunteer job, but it's so helpful when people suggest, like, you suggest somebody, who's been in your fellowship, who's graduated, who, is interested and is going to do a good job. So you put that, in your reply, I declined, but, you could invite Adam, Smith to do it. We pick up on every of that. I can tell you the picture on it. I send it to the managing editor, and she invites right away that suggestion, and that's how you get into the game. And it helps everybody. It helps the authors get a good reviewer interested. It gets the journal. It helps you. You're busy. You can't do everything. So that's a great suggestion. We're almost.
I have a question for you. So once it's published, and I don't think I do this well yet. So after it's published, I put it on my CV. Maybe I'm doing a grand rounds on it or something like that. But really, times have changed. So what should we be doing now? Once we've gotten the data, we've published, what else should we be doing to really disseminate the results? Because again, the purpose of doing research is to change how people practice and make things better for our patients. Really, what should the next steps be beyond our CV?
Yeah, it's sometimes, Daniel, what I think about, when a paper comes out, so let's say the great journal, publishes your paper, it's almost postpartum depression, you've been working on this for 5 years, you go to the answer, you go to the finish line, it's great, but it doesn't end there. And I think you want your data to make a change, and to make a change, people need to read it and cite it. So I think social media, it's really important, presenting it around the world, having your team present it around the world, being recognized, in your case for C-section, in my case for, labor or cervical length or other things. It's so important. For example, some of the main articles at AJOG MFM, we've done these live streams like the ones you and I are doing today. And every time for each of these, we have over 1,000 followers on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. So they get watched. They may have been done a month or 2 ago, but they're watched over and over again. And so all of a sudden, that article gets a lot more attention. And there's actually data. I'm an evidence-based freak, as everybody knows. There is data that doing this will get you cited more. So that's why I wanted people to know about induction of labor or twins or COVID or vaginal progesterone. I just, I want those papers to circulate, and I think it's great to get the authors kind of well known. Maybe you write to Up to Date or to the editor or whatever. I'm part of this too, and get it there. Up to Date gets over 1.5 million hits every day. It's amazing. And then again, once you have a niche and people invite you to talk about different things, then your latest paper you can put in your lecture or in your fellows lecture as they're going around for former fellow like you and I, and all of a sudden you have so much better reach. On the upper right, I guess it's a picture of me in college. Actually, my second son is now in the same college doing that for as an internship and this summer. And I think there's nothing better to have a riddle and try to solve it. You learn so much more. The more in depth I go into something, the more interesting it becomes, the more complex it becomes. And many times I think I have a paper and then I have 10 papers because there's so many issues. And then as you master an issue and you really get to the bottom line, then the next patient, the next morning, you're taken care of. You can take so much better care of. So not only know yourself, but I'll go over this last couple of sayings from Greece, ancient Greece. Nothing in excess. Don't kill yourself. And again, certainty is madness. When you have somebody that teaches you this should be done this way, often in a few years later you'll do it differently. Be open to change. Be open to research. You and I went to thinking staples were better. Mm-hmm. You came in my room. You had done the chi-square. I remember that moment. Your face was very surprised. and so was mine. But no matter how you looked at the data, that's what it showed, right? I mean, you remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember us double checking it because we didn't believe it initially.
Yeah, yeah,
Triple
yeah.
checking.
Again, the glory of medicine that is constantly moving forward. There's always more to learn. Thousands of articles coming out every month, just in pregnancy. And I would suggest question everything. We're not really not sure how people should deliver, when they should deliver, or medications to give. Everything can be questioned and improved. And my pet peeve is that if you have an issue and there is no good answer, it's actually immoral not to randomize. And I'll make the example of cerclage. Many years we didn't know if cerclage worked or not, etc. So every time, depending on the hospital, depending on the attending, somebody may stitch somebody, somebody may not stitch somebody. We wouldn't have gone over for that for another 50, 100 years. It's not right to patients. Actually randomize them eventually does get to a better answer, and then you can save mothers and babies. And if you do randomized studies and you don't publish it, I'm going to hunt you down anywhere in the world, because you consented women, they have sacrificed their pregnancy, quote unquote. They put the faith in your hand. You're going to give me Ansef or azithromycin or whatever you're doing. That data needs to go out. The IRB spent time. A lot of people helped you. The women themselves, the patients. You have to publish it.
And negative studies are equally important.
Negative studies are equally important. There was a recent study we published at the Pink that actually negative studies in obstetrics get published as much as positive studies, and I was so happy, Danya, so happy. Because we as editors are really doing, a negative study is just as important as a positive one. Last 3 slides I think I have here. The harder I work, the luckier I get. When people think, oh, it's so easy to publish, look at Dr. McKean, Dr. Bergella, and Dr. X and Y. They publish so much. It's only because we work at it so much, and we work at it so much because it's a joy to strive after your own potential, which to me is the best definition of happiness, like I kind of go over in this book. And again, it puts me into flow. If I am researching something, I forget where I am, I forget what I'm doing, I forget what day it is. My family members may not like it as much. Many people, as have walk into my office and startle me because I am on another planet. I know it has happened to you. But that's happiness, being in flow and being completely immersed in what you're doing. And again, don't forget your family. We just spent a wonderful Father's Day actually yesterday. It's important to stay together, to be together and work very hard, but don't forget that happiness is social relationships, which are both at work, but even more importantly at home. Any last thoughts, Danya, on from idea to publication?
I think the only last thing I would ask you is, you are so well published. I mean, it's just, I feel like you have multiple people's careers worth of publications. How do you do that? Like, where do you find the time for all of that? I feel like people would really want to know that about you specifically.
Yeah. I think there are a couple of things. First of all, teams. I can't do it all myself, and I would say I don't think I've been first author on a paper in a long time. It's medical students and residents and fellows and former fellows like you and collaborators everywhere. That's one, and second is the success. Once you publish, people recognize that that's something you can do. It's the same way that if you build a house and it's a beautiful house, people are going to come and pick you as their architect or engineer or whatever, because the house is there and it's the pyramids and they stood the test of time. It's really, I think success breeds success. It's if you do a good movie, people are going to ask you to do another movie. So from all over the world now. People say, we're doing this research, can be part of it. Most of it I decline, because I don't need to be on a paper that somebody else is writing. I don't have much impact. But if you say I want to collaborate, or other people I work well with, that logarithmically increases the impact. So I think that finding a niche, having some kind of success, and I never get stuck for more than 5 minutes. If I have something I cannot do, somebody asked us about not confidence intervals but prediction intervals, and I went to 5 statisticians in half a day, and eventually the fifth helped us. It could have taken us a couple weeks, and we did learn, and but I think it's most helpful when you ask for help. Well, Danya, it's been a pleasure to have you around. Looking forward to a lot more research and publications from you, and especially I think you're one of those who can inspire as well, because you have an amazing track history, and hopefully we've inspired some more people, to kind of follow the steps of changing the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye, everyone.